Hey, Brian from Garage Hall. Got a bunch of stuff going on here today, but we are looking at a 2006 Ford Escape. And a customer and friend of mine picked this up. Let me just put that down. And wanted me to go over it to see what was going on with it. But I figure always a great opportunity to show people when you have a vehicle that's got 100,000+ miles on it, just things to look at. So first off, we had some fluid leaking underneath, and it's kind of hard to see, but grab a paper towel, and you could kind of see it's got a red tinge to it. Okay, so that's transmission fluid, but it's up here. So why is it leaking transmission fluid? Well, there's a couple things going on. Hopefully you can see that. But all right, so I had to get a better view of this since it looks like my camera angle is bad, but you can see how that is bent pretty good. And the transmission cooler is actually bent around that. You can see the bend there. And then what I'll see later in the video is it actually is leaking coolant because it pushed both of these back in there. Anyway, you're looking back to the video. It definitely hit something, a pole, I presume, corner of another vehicle. It was just enough to bend your front frame, as well as this is your transmission cooler and your radiator. And I don't know if this has an oil cooler or not, but you can tell the damage that was done on that. So this bar has to be replaced. It probably needs some front frame straightening, and it has to have this this transmission fluid cooler basically fixed, repaired, because you can see all that fluid is leaking out from everywhere in the front. So that's why that's happening. And you can see how it's all wet through here, so it's leaking all the way around. And this is the lines that go to your transmission. And yeah, so that's what's causing that. And this is actually your bottom part of your motor. So this is your oil plug. This is your transmission. So it's one of those front wheel drive, but it does have a drive shaft going to the back. So it actually is 4-wheel drive. So this goes to the back, and it has a smaller differential. And you can see it's got some leaking going on, but it's nothing terrible. What we can do is, that's your top vent. So we just make sure that that's free. Because usually when you see this leaking, your vent is usually clogged up here, and it's got some debris, but it's loose. It's got some buildup on it. So I usually kind of kick that out of the way, and I'll let that breathe a little bit better. And typically what's happening is the pressure of that being clogged up and stuff can push some of this fluid out. So we're going to have to get in there and top that off. And it doesn't look like it actually has a service valve on top other than this pressure relief valve. So we'll probably this vent. So probably unscrew that, fill it there, top it off, just to kind of keep that all lubed up and going. Rear shocks, you can tell they're rusty, but it looks like they're in pretty good shape. Actually, see this here? So you got a leak in your rear shocks. So they can probably be replaced depending on how much play you have in them. And I mean, you got your typical Pennsylvania, Northeast, United States rust going on. You can see some heavier rust along the edges here, but overall it doesn't look any worse than any other car I've seen. That's your flex joint. That looks like that's in good shape. I didn't hear any exhaust leaks, so that's actually a good thing. Now let's go on to the wheel bearings. You can't hear it here, but there is significant bearing noise coming out from both front bearings, which means they both have to be replaced. And on this vehicle, they are like a pressed-in bearing instead of you actually changing the whole hub out, which makes it a little more challenging for the mechanic, I gotta say. It's a little bit more labor intensive because you're basically kind of removing this whole knuckle part out to push the bearing out, so you can work on it. So you got to disconnect it from the shock, got to disconnect it from the lower ball joint, and then disconnect your brakes and then your tie rods and kind of get that out of the way so you can press the bearing out, press the new bearing in. So that's always fun. Not my favorite job, but it is what it is. Now, one thing I noticed on when I was driving it is I felt a little bit of play. So I'm pushing this side to side, and you can see how this tie rod is actually jumping up and down. So this tie rod is bad. But another thing, when you look up, see how the shock moves? Your front strut? That is not supposed to move like that. So there's something going on. That strut needs to be replaced because it's not performing the way it's supposed to. It's supposed to be a lot more rigid than that. And in fact, I'm really not putting that much pressure on this. And you can see how that is twisting like pretty good on there. Anyway, then your linkage, obviously that's got to kind of be replaced. Your ball joints, this little rubber here, that's crushed, which means that your lower ball joint is kind of, on its way out. And then on this side, again, you have a little bit of play, but not as much as you did on that side. So that side definitely needs some TLC, but when you do tie rods, you obviously want to replace them in pairs. And again, you have some crushing going on with your lower ball joint here. So that ball joint needs to be replaced. So your lower control arm, you can see in here that the rubber's all crushed and corroded in there. So your lower control arms should probably be replaced as well. See how it's all flaked and broken in there. And you got some other fluid going on down here too. It looks like actually look like coolant. So my guess is probably the radiator's probably got a leak in it too. It's probably busted. I mean, that's a significant hit. Anyway, so we're gonna have to look at replacing the radiator as well, just from me seeing some of that fluid leaking down here. And it's always good to have a clean paper towel, well, kind of clean. And you just go through and you see what you got dripping. And I just got some transmission fluid in my ear. That's always wonderful. Okay, so then working my way back down to the back. We're checking the wheel hubs back here. I don't feel any movement, which is good. And I don't really feel any grinding or crunching in the rear. So that's good. So those rear hubs are probably okay. The brakes I actually had looked at before, but we can probably get in there. See, your rotor has some rust on the outside of it, but I look for like lipping, which is going to make you fail inspection. And what I mean by that is when you run your finger over, you can feel like a lip in here, and it's like it trenches. So your brake pad kind of trenches in here, and the theory is that it will actually get stuck in those trenches and it won't be able to retract, and then you're overheating your brakes, and then you lose a lot of braking possibility. So, but looking at that, that's not bad. You still have decent life left on the pads from underneath. You can see how rusted your spare is. So if you ever had to get that off, that would be a major problem. Which brings me to this: your rear hub or your rear bearing is obviously behind here. It's mounted in here. But see this axle? That is so corroded. You're probably not going to be able to get that out if it ever did have to be replaced. Which eventually the rear axle would have to be replaced at some point because they do go bad. So mainly because this cap is missing, it's so corroded that that would be a little bit of a nightmare to get off. But you'd have to pound a socket on there to probably get some movement on there, but that's just going to fall apart when it comes time. So that's definitely a project to put off for a later date, especially if it doesn't seem like anything's going on with it. And then going back up here, we don't see any other real issues. You got your typical, oil leakage, which you're going to get from this vehicle. I believe it has 195,000 miles on it, so it's got quite a bit. And you can see up here, that has a little bit of a green tinge, so you are losing coolant up here as well. So that whole front part's got to be replaced. All right, so that's your transmission cooler. your front bar for your frame, and then behind here you're going to have your radiator, which obviously is damaged as well. And then you got some oil. You got a decent leak going on here, so you can kind of see where it's all coming from. Make sure this oil filter is on nice and tight. But you can see all the oil sludge, and that's typical. You can put some stop leak in there, and it'll kind of keep that at bay. And that's basically it. That is your complete overview of your undercarriage of your 2006 Ford Escape. Oh, one other noteworthy thing. I don't know if you guys caught this on the video, but it's got a strap here holding the hood down, because you can kind of see the line of crack here. The hood mechanism doesn't latch the hood closed. So I don't know if that happened at the accident or post-accident or what, but the hood latch needs to be replaced as well. That's it's bent pretty good. Anyway, Brian from Garage Hall, thanks for watching. Be safe out there.